Today we're going to take a look at the Nikon ZR. Now this camera was released with a lot of hype a few weeks ago, and I wanted to get my hands on it because I think this camera is what a lot of people were hoping the RED Komodo will be, and I think it's going to have a similar impact, if not more, than the RED Komodo did because it's a lot more affordable. This camera is $2,200, where when the Komodo came out, it was $6,000. Now the Komodo and the Nikon ZR are very close in price, and I still have my Komodo. So I was lucky enough to get my hands on this and test not only the Nikon ZR with my Sigma 24-35 on a gimbal, but I also brought out my RED Komodo just to get a few shots side by side in a challenging lighting situation, just to see how much you could recover in the Nikon ZR, since the Nikon ZR does shoot 12-bit R3D, where the RED Komodo shoots the normal 16-bit R3D RAW like the other RED cameras. So let's take a look at some of this footage, and then I'll talk about my experience using the R3D. And I do want to let you know this isn't a full review. This is more like a first impressions video, but I like this camera enough to where I do think I'm going to end up picking one up at some point. But let's take a look at some of the footage. I was lucky enough to have my buddy Johnny here, who just purchased a Nikon ZR, and he's a fellow RED owner. Johnny, how long would you say you've been using RED cameras for?
I would say 10 years now.
When you look at the ZR and the Komodo footage side by side, you can instantly tell there's just a little bit more to the image of the Komodo. There's more depth in the image, there's more dynamic range, and then when you push and pull the image in post, there's a lot more to it than the ZR. And so one of the things that this test showed, even though it was only a few shots, was that when you're using the Komodo, there's just a lot more latitude, and there's a reason why if you're in challenging lighting situations, you want to use a camera with the highest dynamic range and the best codec, best raw codec, especially if you can push and pull the image. If you're trying to push the image on the ZR, it quickly starts to not necessarily fall apart, but it doesn't look as good. For instance, when we were shooting at ISO 800 and we were overexposed shooting for my face and not for the highlights in the sky, when we brought it down to ISO 200, you lose a lot of the detail information in the face, and it just looks a lot more crunched than if you're really exposing for the shot at ISO 800 and exposing for the highlights. And the face just looks better at ISO 800 when you're exposing for the highlights instead of exposing for the face. And that was a really big takeaway off the bat. When filming with heavy ND, especially variable ND filters with RED cameras over the years, I've had to use IR cut filters just so you don't get that crazy magenta shift. But one of the things I noticed with the ZR is because it's a Nikon sensor, it doesn't seem to need that, which is really great because I didn't have one for that camera and I did not have magenta shift. So it is worth pointing that out, that you're not going to have those issues with the ZR. Now, there's obviously a lot of differences between the Komodo and the ZR besides the fact that they don't have the same raw codec. The Komodo Super 35, it's got a global shutter. It uses CFast 2.0 cards, which is kind of old school. It uses BP batteries from Canon that really aren't produced anymore other than third-party sellers, although they're official with RED. I've had a lot of problems with those batteries over the years too, so we'll talk about that in my 5 years with the RED Komodo video. But the Nikon ZR has that mirrorless form factor that the Komodo doesn't have. The Komodo still kind of has that boxy cinema camera form factor, which a lot of users want. But I think there's a lot of users who aren't in production. They're doing maybe like weddings, videography type work, jobs that work better or more suited towards mirrorless cameras, especially the fact that the ZR starts up really quickly, where the Komodo still has a decent boot up time. I think the ZR is going to work really well with smaller crews, people who want to use mirrorless cameras but want to have kind of that red color science, because you definitely have that red look out of this footage. You just don't have a lot of the benefits from the real RED cameras. It's not a RED sensor. It's a Nikon sensor inside this Nikon camera. It makes total sense. I think the fact that we're able to get this red color science in the R3D mode is still a really big deal. Now, because you can't push and pull the image so much, you really have to be more on point with your exposure on this camera. I think for narrative productions where you're lighting things, I actually think the ZR is probably going to be a really great secondary camera, like a C or a D cam, because you can match your stuff really easily. But if you're filming in super challenging lighting scenarios and you're trying to maximize the dynamic range from your camera, that's where I think if you're used to shooting with REDs, you're still going to want to stick with your REDs, where the ZR, you're just not going to have that kind of latitude. That doesn't necessarily make it a bad camera. It just makes it a tool, and it's not the right tool for every job, just like the Komodo is not the right tool for a lot of the gigs that I'm working on right now. But it does work really well in certain scenarios, and the ZR will absolutely work well in scenarios, especially with the autofocus. I mean, you look at all these shots, all the example footage, that's all autofocus adapting my Sigma 24 to 35. I'm not using an official Nikon adapter, and it's able to lock onto the eyes. Is it as good as a Sony camera like we're using now? No, but it's much better than any RED camera's been in the past, and it's absolutely usable for video work. You can use this on a wedding. You can use this for corporate work, and you're going to have autofocus. And so what the ZR has done, I was starting to lose hope with RED, especially after the whole issue before RED sold, where they were starting to have, Sigma RF glass coming out, and it just was not working at all on the RED cameras. Where now I'm starting to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel, where we're starting to see RED cameras with the Z mount. The Z mount has a lot more third-party options than the RF mount, that's for sure. And we'll see why in an upcoming video soon. I do think I'm probably going to pick up a ZR after playing with it the past few days. I didn't want to fall for the hype. I wanted to be able to have this camera hands-on. And now that I've been able to play with it, it's definitely a camera I'm interested in. I mean, that screen alone, that big, big screen on the back, you don't necessarily have to have an external monitor or whatever. You may be able to just keep this thing nice and small, again, as an extra camera or a gimbal camera. There's a lot more to see with the Nikon ZR, especially because it only makes sense to film in that camera in the R3D codec, and the file sizes are massive. I mean, just from the less than an hour we filmed, it was 500 gigs of footage. I mean, it was a lot. So I'm interested to see if maybe Nikon changes the menu, because the menu is a bit clunky. If they add more compression options, because I would like to have lower compression options. I also like to have higher compression options if I want to bring this thing on set and use it and do some green screen work with it. And then I'd also like to see if they bring in some of the RED exposure tools, because I know a lot of people have mentioned the traffic lights. It's a big deal on the RED cameras. And if this is a true RED Nikon hybrid, I'd like to see some of the RED technology be introduced into the ZR. And that's why I'm willing to invest in this camera, because it's not crazy expensive. It's pretty much the price of the FX30 that I'm filming on right now. So I'm willing to make that investment. And again, you'll see in some future videos why I want to potentially invest in the Z mount, because as much as I love Canon and I love the RF mount, there's also some problems with Canon. They're still not allowing a lot of third-party companies to make lenses. The longer I've been shooting with Canon RF, the more I realize I think Canon's just going to hold on to this mount until their patent expires or whatever it may be. So we're probably not going to see a lot of third-party lenses. And as we start seeing, all these great third-party companies making autofocus lenses, that's going to be a requirement for me. I mean, we're shooting on a Sirui autofocus anamorphic Super 35 lens right here on the FX30, and I love this lens. I mean, it's something that I never thought would be seen. And I think at some point we're probably going to see lenses like this pop up in the future for other lens mounts, other formats, and we're probably not going to be able to use that in Canon RF. So I'll be interested to use those kinds of lenses on RED cameras. So let me know in the comments, do you think the Nikon ZR is worth the hype, or do you think it's overblown? Or are you going to pick one up? Let me know. I do think I'm probably going to end up picking one up. You can let me know if you think it's a mistake or not. But if you got knowledge or value out of today's video, please make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell to keep up to date with the latest videos on the channel. And until next time, my name is Jeff Fagien. Thank you for joining me as always, and I will catch you in the next video.